capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number, or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight we're going to be continuing on with the book A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. We are in Chapter 5. We're right in the thick of the revolutionary times, looking at how the owner class, the ruling class, convinced and coerced the working class to join the revolution. Before we get started, though, I'd like to plug once more Ouija bread, the bread that is handmade by my wife, Amanda. You can check it out at Instagram. On Instagram, it's _ Ouija bread _. What political tendencies do I pertain to? I like to think of myself as an anarcho-communist, basically. I like to think that there's some use to a degree of organization and a degree of government, but I would rather have it be organized from the bottom up rather than the top down. So I basically believe in what Lenin laid out in State and Revolution. I just think it should come from the other direction, not from the top, but from the bottom. I believe in building dual power as the best strategy to basically enact a revolution now. That sort of thing. How's that sit with you, Diego Zali? What are your political tendencies? What political tendencies pertain to you? Anyway, well, I'm waiting for an answer on that. Yeah, check out Ouija Bread. It's handmade bread by my wife, and it's another way to support the stream. And we are able to ship anywhere in the United States and Canada. Though it is a large loaf that you're getting. It's 3-4 pound loaf. So just be prepared to pay a bit in shipping. She's a very small operation. It's just her. So you can't afford any sort of bulk rates or anything like that. But it is handmade sourdough. She's been getting into doing seeded sourdoughs with chia seeds, encrusting the top of it. So check it out. Call yourself an ML. Of course, every Marxist tendency pertains to material conditions. Yeah, I believe in dialectical materialism. I think it explains a lot, just as Marx said. I would say you're in a good place. I believe in left unity, that every tendency has something to offer, and every tendency, and just using a diversity of tactics and tendencies is probably the best strategy overall, if for no other reason that there's not that many of us. So we can't afford to be so choosy about who we call comrade. I'd say as long as you're against capitalism, that's good enough for me. Let's get into the book. So the last sentence was basically the tenant farmers found themselves, rather than just having a crappy contract with the landholders as they did before the war, now had mortgages from banks and they were in basically the same position beforehand and after. So going through the Revolutionary War did not really improve their material conditions, although I'm sure they were swept up in the revolutionary rhetoric and hopes and dreams that it would, but it was not to be. From the beginning, the founders framed it in a way, the Constitution in a way that enshrined private property and, set up a number of reactionary institutions, including the Senate, including the Supreme Court, who would just be the death of progress time and time again, and that is what they have done from their inception. Uh, really, really throttling any momentum in progress that the nation has had. So, and they also didn't believe in democracy, really, especially rule of the people themselves. So that's our founding fathers for those of you like myself who are in the U.S. All right, but let's get back into it. Here we go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some people got kickbacks for their help. Some people got favored positions, maybe for what they did during, who knows, or just for what they were promised. But it was clear they had to give some concessions. It couldn't just be completely the same for everybody. But they managed to screw over the masses in the process and basically keep them in the place that they were in before. Probably not very much. Getting back to that in a second. Yeah, I. Oh, you can't hear the video. I am playing the video. Oh, you know what? Boy. Pro streamer here. We'll back up a little bit there. Yeah, probably should have put the video on the screen if I wanted people to hear it. But yeah, I basically agree with you, Diego Zali. Democratic ideas and broadly capitalist systems started giving concessions such as limited democracy, if we can even call it that. Yeah, I usually refer to it as a bourgeois democracy. It is a democracy first and foremost for the ruling elites. So they have representation. I mean, there's a reason that they call the U.S. Senate the Millionaires Club, because you basically have to be a millionaire in order to run a statewide campaign uh, and win. And so, oh, lo and behold, they support the interests of the wealthy, the landowners, and the property owners. So thanks for letting me know, though, that I was being stupid with my video. So we'll back it up. I think we're at right around 31. So we'll stop
being
again.
tenants, but were now mortgagees,
Yeah, here we go.
paying back loans from banks instead of rent to landlords. It seems that the rebellion against British rule allowed a certain group of the colonial elite to replace those loyal to England, give some benefits to small landholders, and leave poor white working people and tenant farmers in very much their old situation.
Pretty much.
What did the revolution mean to the Native Americans, the Indians? They had been ignored by the fine words of the Declaration, had not been considered equal, certainly not in choosing those who would govern the American territories in which they lived,
Thanks.
nor in being able to pursue happiness as they had pursued it for centuries before the white Europeans arrived. Now, with the British out of the way, the Americans could begin the inexorable process of pushing the Indians off their lands, killing them if they resisted. In short, as Francis Jennings puts it, the white Americans were fighting against British imperial control in the East and for their own imperialism in the West.
Before the Revolution, the Indians had been subdued by force in Virginia and in New England. Elsewhere, they had worked out modes of coexistence with the colonies, but around 1750, with the colonial population growing fast, the pressure to move westward onto new land set the stage for conflict with the Indians. Land agents from the east began appearing in the Ohio River Valley on the territory of a confederation of tribes called the Covenant Chain, for which the Iroquois were spokesmen. In New York, through intricate swindling, 800,000 acres of Mohawk land were taken, ending the period of Mohawk-New York friendship. Chief Hendrick of the Mohawks is recorded speaking his bitterness to Governor George Clinton and the Provincial Council of New York in 1753. Quote, "Brother, when we came here to relate our grievances about our lands, we expected to have something done for us. And we have told you that the covenant chain of our forefathers was like to be broken, and brother, you tell us that we shall be redressed at Albany. But we know them so well. We will not trust to them, for they, the Albany merchants, are no people but devils. So, as soon as we come home, we will send up a belt of wampum to our brothers, the other 5 nations, to acquaint them the covenant chain is broken between you and us. So, brother, you are not to expect to hear of me anymore, and brother, we desire to hear no more of you." When the British fought the...
Yeah, if only could have ended at that point. But they, yeah, you know, as we're going to see, the colonists were pretty hungry for land and all the riches that could be gotten by stealing it. So conflict continued.
French for North America in the 7 Years' War, the Indians fought on the side of the French. The French were traders but not occupiers of Indian lands, while the British clearly coveted their hunting grounds and living space. Someone reported the conversation.
Well, hello, James. I see you're on Twitch again. How you liking it? It's a lot of weird emojis to get used to and channel points and all that sort of stuff. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll help you navigate it better. But you probably noticed I think I still have pre-roll ads. I'm not sure if those are on or not. But if you want to avoid those ads, the best way to do it is to subscribe to the channel, and then you won't see the ad breaks. And if you have a Amazon Prime account, you can link it to your Twitch account, and then you get 1 free subscription a month. So hopefully, hopefully you'll use it on mine. That would be cool. Awesome, James. Good to have you.
Conversation of the Shingas, chief of the Delaware Indians, with the British General Braddock, who sought his help against the French. Quote, "Shingas asked General Braddock whether the Indians that were friends to the English might not be permitted to live and trade among the English, and have hunting grounds sufficient to support themselves and families, on which General Braddock said that no savage should inherit the land. On which Shingas and the other chiefs answered that if they might not have liberty to live on the land, they would not fight for it."
So again, we have the native peoples offering compromise, saying, hey, we recognize that you want to live here too, and you know, things are changing, and hey, here's a way we could work it out where we could all get what we want and not resort to bloodshed. And the English are just like, no, we will not share land with natives at all. I would call it xenophobia, but they were the outsiders, so kind of a different way of looking at it, but it is like a xenophobia of, you know, not wanting any sort of impurity amongst your peoples from others and so forth. So this is the pattern that we've seen throughout the entire colonial history of this continent, of white people being very afraid of intermixing, or white people in power being very afraid of their people intermixing with locals, not wanting to live together, and usually just choosing violence and slaughter when push comes to shove.
When that war ended in 1763, the French, ignoring their old allies, ceded to the British lands west of the Appalachians. The Indians therefore united to make war on the British western forts. This is called Pontiac's conspiracy by the British, but a liberation war for independence, in the words used by Francis Jennings. Under orders from British General Geoffrey Amherst, the commander of Fort Pitts gave the attacking Indian chiefs with whom he was negotiating blankets from the smallpox hospital. It was a pioneering effort at what is now called biological warfare. An epidemic soon spread among the Indians.
So there is contention about whether or not this story was apocryphal, whether this sort of germ warfare has ever taken place against the natives. But I guess when it comes down to it, it doesn't really matter, because one way or another, a large portion of Native Americans contracted smallpox and were wiped out by it. So whether it was intentional, which, I mean, considering the behavior of white settlers so far in this book, probably pretty likely that this sort of thing or something similar to it did happen, or whether it was just a coincidence and an accidental exposure. It still ended up the same way for the native peoples. Pretty bad.
Despite
See, Ali Osher's in the chat there. Thanks for the 10 bits there, Ali. Appreciate having you here. Maybe next time you'll come on the karaoke stream, Ali. I'd love to have you. We had our first ever leftist karaoke night this last Friday. It was a real great time. I just got the video out on YouTube. In fact, I can link to it right now, so y'all can take a look at that at your leisure. But it was a real fun time. Sang a lot of great stuff, and thankfully I was able to get it up on YouTube just by demonetizing it. So no strikes against the channel, which is always good. Oh, you were busy. Well, maybe next time. Maybe next time, Ali. It was a ton of fun. I think everyone had a really good time. Had good response afterward too. Yeah, I think James. I think you were the first one in the audience. You were right there at the beginning, and you had the most comments of the night too. I think you had over 100 comments, which was pretty amazing. A lot of great support. So I thank you for that, James. All right, popping it in the chat right now for you. Oops. So Ali says I saw streamers who are saying fascism and neo-Nazi, we should not worry. What? Yeah, well, I mean, we are seeing the pretty naked rise of fascism right now. And while it may be coupling itself with a sort of Christo-fascism, a Christianity that is amenable to fascistic goals and ideas, I mean, it's still fascism. It is extreme control of the people. It is appeal to imagined past. It is a looking at the entirety of modern civilization as degenerate and having fallen away from the gods or some sort of divinity. Any way you slice it, things like the striking down of Roe, the attacking of other rights like the Miranda rights, making it so that somehow, after how many decades of having Miranda rights in place, that is no longer a requirement nationally for police officers to read to you while they arrest you. I don't know how that gets past the due process clause, part of the Constitution, but somehow it did. And that's the thing is for all the pomp and circumstance and pageantry and honorifics slung all over the Supreme Court. When it comes down to it, they rule in very political ways, and they always have. It's never been an apolitical body as much as it has built up its reputation to be one. It's pretty clear from the rulings. I mean, you go back to the Dred Scott case. Clearly a reaction to Reconstruction and destroying the gains through that took place through Reconstruction after the Civil War, all the way through the modern era. I mean, this is what it is. This is what it has always been, and it's very strange that the two main political parties in the U.S. are always trying to pretend otherwise, and yet also recognize it during every presidential run, because every presidential run, it's one of the most critical reasons to vote for such and such party is because there'll be opportunities to put justices in the court. But if justices were truly neutral and just, interpreters of the law as it stands and without bringing their political prejudice, then it wouldn't matter if a Republican or a Democratic president was the one doing the nomination, because they would be neutral. But they drop all that pretense of neutrality to say, oh, you got to vote for us, otherwise they're going to get a really terrible person in. So and it's just funny. It's just funny. But yeah, the judiciary at the federal level has broken away from all reason and precedent, and will continue to do so until they are stopped. And that's the thing, they're operating outside the bounds of, any sort of legality. They have no reason to strike down these things. They went out of their way to strike down these rulings that have stood for decades, based on a very cherry-picked and selectively read interpretation of the original Constitution and the Founding Fathers. So, standing on principle, wagging our fingers at them, saying, calling them out for not following the rules doesn't really do anything, because it's going to take, going outside of, bending the law, going outside of what powers can be afforded to, say, a president, in order to rein them back in. And when it comes down to it, the things that they're striking down have a lot of popular support. Like, even the right to an abortion, I think, still enjoys about 60% approval in the United States. And for something especially as contentious as that is always purported to be, that's pretty major, that over 50% of the country still stands by it. So, that is all to say that should a president overreach their strict powers, no one is really going to do anything to stop them. I mean, the Democrats are, in slight control of the Senate and in control of the House for now. There's no real good reason to not try whatever you can, whether or not it's strictly legal or strictly defined or nebulous or not, because they're taking away human rights, and that should be a clear, bright line for any party that claims to care about freedom and human rights. All right, but anyway, let's get back to the book.
Despite this and the burning of villages, the British could not destroy the will of the Indians, who continued guerrilla war. A peace was made, and with the British agreeing to establish a line at the Appalachians, beyond which settlements would not encroach on Indian territory. This was the Royal Proclamation of 1763, and it angered Americans. The original Virginia Charter said its land went westward to the ocean. It helps to explain why most of the Indians fought for England.
Virginia just taking up 4,000 miles of land to its west. Why not? I mean, it's just one more example of how ridiculous any sort of deed to a land really is, no matter how much legal theory you put behind it. It's when it comes down to it, uh, in the English form or the colonial form or however you derive it, it all starts with the theft of land from someone else, pushing people off their land, killing them, or one way or another, just taking what you want. So that's what all land claims are based on, especially in a colonial environment. That's true, James. And the Republicans will overreach at every turn, and they don't care because they care about the results. The ends always justify the means, and their base will always forgive um, overreach and playing outside the rules or being hypocrites, even as long as the policies they want to see enacted are enacted, or more often, the policies they don't want to see enacted are blocked. They'll just keep giving him a pass. They'll keep voting for Mitch McConnell, even though he changes the rules to favor himself or changes his stance or his political theory that backs up what he says to suit himself, this way and that way. It doesn't matter. They'll just keep on voting for him. Even though he's incredibly hated in his own state, he's just hated a little bit less than any other challenger. Yeah, you put up your own flag. Yeah, we're no different than in those times. We like to think that we're all civilized now and above all of that sort of thing. But all the land that we sit on was at one point stolen. So that kind of puts a big illegitimate crack in the foundation of any legal body of work that legitimizes any claim to land. So, and the question is, what do you do to go forward? Well, I think a good start would be to abolish private property, to say that no one should be able to make their living simply by owning, whether that's owning machinery, a factory, intellectual property, or land, or whatever. No one should be able to make money simply by being the owner. Anytime there's an enterprise, it should be owned collectively. And anytime you have a residential situation, that should also be owned collectively. But the difference being that in residential terms, there's no means of production that you're owning. It's just the means of subsistence. So that all these spoils of conquest that have been kept in very small number of hands since the beginning will at the very least be able to be redistributed and taken advantage of equally by all the people, including the ones who are the descendants of those that were stolen from. Yeah, that would be nice too, James, but this is where we're at in colonial capitalism. It needs to have one more person to exploit, one more place to plunder, and we're kind of running out of those places to the point where you have companies like BlackRock buying up real estate property to the point where people are not going to be able to own a home or buy a home. Like my generation, I'm on the older end of millennials. We have a very much lower home ownership rate than all the generations that came before us. We own a very much smaller chunk of the overall wealth as compared to generations before us at this same age. And it's even worse for Gen Z, my children's generation. They're they have very little hope of ever owning any sort of land of their own or housing of their own. It's just getting worse because the top has gotten to the point where it must cannibalize its means of subsistence, which is the consumer base. It is making it so we're less and less able to even consume the products that it produces. And price gouges with gasoline and with food. That can't go on forever. At some point, people have to have basic necessities, and there's only so much debt that will be extended to them before that's taken away. So there's only so long this can go before catastrophe, really, a huge debt crisis. And that is because we have run out of great new areas to exploit. There's no two ways about it. All right, continuing on, though.
England during the Revolution. With their French allies, then their English allies gone, the Indians faced a new land-coveting nation alone. The Americans assumed now that the Indian land was theirs, but the expeditions they sent westward to establish this were overcome, which they recognized in the names they gave these battles: Harmar's humiliation and St. Clair's shame. And even when General Anthony Wayne defeated the Indians' Western Confederation in 1798 at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, he had to recognize their power. In the Treaty of Grenville, it was agreed that in return for certain cessions of land, the United States would give up claims to the Indian lands north of Ohio, east of the Mississippi, and south of the Great Lakes, but that if the Indians decided to sell these lands, they would offer them first to the United States.
Oh, they get the right of first refusal. Isn't that a nice arrangement? So James asks, how do I send up the floating up screen heart emoji like on Facebook? Unfortunately, you can't. If I was only on Twitch, I would have all those bells and whistles where any emoji that you put into the chat would float around the screen. But because I want to make this a multi-stream experience, I guess Restream has not figured out how to hook that stuff in yet, unfortunately. So yeah, so you just have to settle for chat emojis. Sorry.
Jennings, putting the Indian into the center of the American Revolution, after all, it was Indian land that everyone was fighting over, sees the revolution as a, quote, multiplicity of variously oppressed and exploited peoples who preyed upon each other, unquote. With the Eastern elite controlling the lands on the seaboard, the poor seeking land were forced to go west, there becoming a useful bulwark for the rich because, as Jennings says, quote, the first target of the Indian's hatchet was the frontiersman's skull, unquote. The situation of black slaves as a result of the American Revolution was more complex. Thousands of blacks fought with the British. 5,000 were with the revolutionaries, most of them from the North, but there were also free blacks from Virginia and Maryland. The lower South was reluctant to arm blacks. Amid the urgency and chaos of war, thousands took their freedom, leaving on British ships at the end of the war to settle in England, Nova Scotia, the West Indies, or Africa. Many others stayed in America as free blacks, evading their masters. In the northern states, the combination of blacks in the military, the lack of powerful economic need for slaves, and the rhetoric of the Revolution led to the end of slavery, but very slowly. As late as 1810, 30,000 blacks, 1/4 of the black population of the North, remained slaves. In 1840, there were still 1,000 slaves in the North. In the Upper South, there were more free Negroes than before, leading to more control legislation. In the Lower South, slavery expanded with the growth of rice and cotton plantations. What the Revolution did was to create space and opportunity for blacks to begin making demands of white society. Sometimes these demands came from the new small black elites in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Richmond, Savannah, sometimes from articulate and bold slaves. Pointing to the Declaration of Independence, blacks petitioned Congress and the state legislatures to abolish slavery, to give blacks equal rights. In Boston, blacks asked for city money, which whites were getting to educate their children. In Norfolk, they asked to be allowed to testify in court. Nashville, black...
Okay, so these are very important points that he's making. He's not saying it directly, but it does show that it's not as though the North was just this benevolent area that was totally against, the enslavement of black people and wanted nothing more than their equality under the law. And far from it. They may have abolished slavery first, but that was more an economical issue rather than an ethical one. So yeah, it's good to destroy the myth that the North was all benevolent and enlightened and all these sorts of things, because there's plenty of racism to go around there as well in this time.
Blacks asserted that free Negroes, quote, ought to have the same opportunities of doing well that any person would have, unquote. Peter Matthews, a free Negro butcher in Charleston, joined other free black artisans and tradesmen in petitioning the legislature to repeal discriminatory laws against blacks. In 1780, 7 blacks in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, petitioned the legislature for the right to vote, linking taxation to representation. Quote, "We apprehend ourselves to be aggrieved in that while we are not allowed the privilege of freemen of the state, having no vote or influence in the election of those that tax us, yet many of our color, as is well known, have cheerfully entered the field of battle in the defense of the common cause, and that, as we conceive, against a similar exertion of power in regard to taxation, too well known to need a recital in this place."
Yeah, they're using the myths and the words of the revolutionaries against them, saying, hey, you guys were right. There shouldn't be taxation without representation. Anyone that is a free living person in society should be able to vote for the representatives, but you're not allowing us to do that just because of the color of our skin. So, what's going on here? Why are we being disenfranchised?
A black man, Benjamin Banneker, who taught himself mathematics and astronomy, predicted accurately a solar eclipse and was appointed to plan the new city of Washington, wrote to Thomas Jefferson, "I suppose it is a truth too well attested to you to need proof here that we are a race of beings who have long labored under the abuse and censure of the world, that we have long been looked upon with an eye of contempt, and that we have long been considered rather as brutish than human, and scarcely capable of mental endowments. I apprehend you will embrace every opportunity to eradicate that train of absurd and false ideas and opinions which so generally prevails with respect to us, and that your sentiments are concurrent with mine, which are, that one universal Father hath given being to us all, and that he hath not only made us all of one flesh, but that he hath also, without partiality, afforded us all the same sensations and endowed us all with the same facilities."
True enough. And there's those, hearkening back to the Declaration of Independence yet again, or more particularly the one passage that talks about how everyone is created equal and is therefore, they say endowed by their maker with certain inalienable rights, those among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The parts of both the Constitution and all the founding documents that stick with people the most, that ring true the most. And here we have them again as a call to freedom, because they themselves were, a pretty good call to freedom for everybody. And not just freedom from impediments, but freedom to pursue happiness. Freedom to that comes about through having to not struggle, having your needs met one way or another. But yeah, again, being not afforded to black people, as they were not afforded to many people that had to struggle for a long, long time in order to make those words more true and more, actualized in American policy.
Banneker asked Jefferson, quote, to wean yourself from those narrow prejudices which you have imbibed, unquote.
And that's very true. And there's a reason also that they say all men are created equal, because they just didn't ever consider any idea that women would be on the same footing as men. They were not seen that way. They were seen as more or less property. Probably property you had a more intimate relationship than most in your house, but property nonetheless, where you told them what to do. You basically treated them like a child, even though they often served the men, as though they were their mommy or live-in maid. And in rich households continue to do so to this day. So yeah, that's always the rub, is who do you consider all men or all people? And that's the easiest way to justify all sorts of atrocities, is you say, oh, that group, they don't count as people. So whatever happens to them, whatever we do to them, whatever is done to them by others, it's fine. Who cares? They're not real people anyway. And it's one reason I try to avoid dehumanizing language, even against people that are really horrible people. Also because it's too easy then to separate yourself from those people. If you make someone into a monster, well then of course you're also implying that you're not a monster, and they are somehow fundamentally separate and different from you. But they're not. We've seen time and time again in this book that lots of really ordinary people are capable of really horrible things, given the right cultural backing and legal backing. So I try to avoid dehumanizing anyone, even people that are horrible to their core. Yeah, they were not considered people. Yep. Yeah. Those founding fathers that all the reactionaries today want to emulate and bring our country back to their vision of the way things should be. No thanks.
Jefferson tried his best, as an enlightened, thoughtful individual might, but the structure of American society, the power of the cotton plantation, the slave trade, the politics of unity between northern and southern elites, and the long culture of race prejudice in the colonies, as well as his own weaknesses, that combination of practical need and ideological fixation, kept Jefferson a slave owner throughout his life.
Yeah, that's what kept him.
The inferior position of blacks, the exclusion of Indians from the new society, the establishment of supremacy for the rich and powerful in the new nation, all this was already settled in the colonies by the time of the Revolution. With the English out of the way, it could now be put on paper, solidified, regularized, made legitimate by the Constitution of the United States, drafted at a convention of revolutionary leaders in Philadelphia. To many Americans over the years, the Constitution drawn up in 1787 has seemed a work of genius put together by wise, humane men who created a legal framework for democracy and equality. This view is stated a bit extravagantly by historian George Bancroft.
Yeah, there's a counter-narrative to that, and part of it includes, there's a meme that's been going around recently too, that shows that, that famous picture of the signing. Maybe there's a signer of the Declaration of Independence, but it could have been the Constitution too. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Oh, it was Declaration of Independence painting. But they show, they put a dot over the face of every founding father that was also a slave owner, saying that, what they were fighting for was not exactly freedom for everybody. It was freedom for them, far and away. And these were all very elite men, too, all these founding fathers. All wealthy property owners, businessmen. So no wonder that's the sort of constitution they came up with, was one that enshrined all of their rights, uh, largely to the exclusion of everybody else.
Writing in the early 19th century. The Constitution establishes nothing that interferes with equality and individuality. It knows nothing of differences by descent or opinions of favored classes, or legalized religion, or the political power of property. It leaves the individual alongside of the individual. As the sea is made up of drops, American society is composed of separate, free, and constantly moving atoms, ever in reciprocal action, so that the institutions and laws of the country rise out of the masses of individual thought, which, like the waters of the ocean, are rolling evermore.
Ugh. I always have to cringe a little bit when people talk about how we're all just a collection of free individuals and we all have the freedom to change our own lives and blah, 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 blah. In some respects, that is true, that there are no legal impediments to most people uh, seeking out things like education and starting a business or just living their life how they want to. But there's usually material impediments. So the idea that everyone is just the same little drop of water making up a large ocean, and every drop is equal to every other drop, not only in, theoretically, but in practice, well, that's just ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You don't have generational poverty if everyone is on completely equal footing. You don't have generational wealth if everyone is just on equal footing and truly has an equal opportunity to succeed. And you don't have equality if the structure itself allows for, owners to sit back and take the excess labor value of their workers basically at a whim. And that's a legalized form of thievery, but thievery it still is. So yeah, the idea that we're all just the same individuals standing shoulder to shoulder, equally free, is completely bogus, in fact. Yeah, and you're right too, James. The two-party systems are, so entwined with business interests that, it's little wonder we're sliding into fascism even more now, rolling back the meager civil rights gains that we've had in the past, 100 years plus. Yeah. When both major parties effectively structurally shut out any competition from, outside parties, and are so made up of and beholden to the business elites, then, yeah, again, small wonder they keep voting in favor of preserving their liberties over everyone else's.
Another view of the Constitution.
And when only some people have liberties, that's also called privilege, not rights.
Was put forward early in the 20th century by historian Charles Beard, arousing anger and indignation, including a denunciatory editorial in the New York Times. He wrote in his book, An Economic Interpretation of the Constitution, quote, "Inasmuch as the primary object of a government, beyond the mere repression of physical violence, is the making of the rules which determine the property relations of members of society, the dominant classes, whose rights are thus to be determined, must perforce obtain from the government such rules as are consonant with the larger interests necessary to the continuance of their economic processes, or they must themselves..."
The large interests of their own way of doing economic activity. Yeah. Or they must themselves control
the organs of government, unquote. In short, yep, Beard said, the rich must, in their own interest, either control the government directly or control the laws by which government operates. Beard applied this general idea to the Constitution by studying the economic backgrounds and political ideas of the 55 men who gathered in Philadelphia in 1787 to draw up the Constitution. He found that a majority of them were lawyers by profession, that most of them were men of wealth in land, slaves, manufacturing, or shipping, that half of them had money loaned out at interest, and that 40 of the 55 held government bonds, according to the records of the Treasury Department. Thus,
The common
Beard
folk.
found that most of the makers of the Constitution had some direct economic interest in establishing a strong federal government. The manufacturers needed protective tariffs, the moneylenders wanted to stop the use of paper money to pay off debts, the land speculators wanted protection as they invaded Indian lands, slave owners needed federal security against slave revolts and runaways, bondholders wanted a government able to raise money by nationwide taxation to pay off those bonds.
Yeah, they wanted to conduct interstate and international commerce, and they didn't want to have, different sets of rules for people that could be living just a little bit away from them in another state. That makes a lot of sense. You don't want to have extra regulations for yourself while your competitors pretty close by with pretty much the same means available to them don't have such regulations, because then they're going to end up putting you out of business. So, yeah, it's understandable that they wanted a nationwide system, because it was for their own interests. Hey, you gonna come on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, listen, some guy cried Petco about Jesus' rainbows.
Jesus is rainbows, huh?
Yeah.
What was he crying about?
Oh, they have a pride flag up in Petco. He's like literally crying and screaming.
He's crying and screaming because they had a pride flag in Petco.
Yep, he said that was a satanic symbol. An affront to Jesus.
Wait, how is the rainbow a satanic symbol?
I don't know. Why don't you go to Petco and see if you can find him and ask?
That's funny.
Yeah. That's the word I would use.
Oh,
You're gonna have to move it closer to me.
all right.
Hey, folks.
Hey. James says welcome.
Hi, James.
And yeah, James, it does sound kind of corrupt that the business people of the time were just literally plotting for how they could enshrine their own rights in the Constitution to make sure that, no one took advantage of them, even other people, of their same nation. Yeah. A touch of collusion in all that, yeah.
This has been happening since day one. That's not surprising.
Right. Yeah. So I've been saying that it's, small wonder that this system reproduces itself again and again, where the wealthy elites have all the control over the levers of government because they stated from the outset that that's what they wanted.
It's like Tribbles, but not cute.
All right. Shall we continue?
Yeah.
Or did you have more you wanted to say on that?
I mean, I got a lot of things I want to say, but
Well, get it off your chest. Let's hear it.
self-control.
All right. Here we go.
4 groups, Beard noted, were not represented in the Constitutional Convention: slaves, indentured servants, women, men without property. And so, the Constitution did not reflect the interests of those groups.
When they say men without property,
Mm-hmm.
are they referring to black men?
Well,
Or
yes.
is that a broader?
But also, also just free working men, white men who were working class, that didn't own any means of production, that didn't own a factory, didn't own a piece of agricultural land, didn't collect rent, any of that sort of thing.
So not Charles Ingalls, because he's a farmer.
Was he? Oh, no, he was a wealthy guy. Wait,
They lived in a crap shack.
what? Charles? Wait,
Are you thinking of Nellie's dad, who ran the shop?
who are you talking about?
There's a Little House on the Prairie joke.
Oh, his name was Ingalls, huh? Interesting. So, wait, he owned land though.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would not include that. He would have been included in the interest of the Constitution. But here they're just spelling it out right now. working class people, people that were, basically contractual slaves. Those would be indentured servitude, people in indentured servitude, actual slaves, and women not mentioned in the Constitution, not at represented in the convention that drew up the Constitution, and somehow didn't end up having any rights afterwards.
So I feel like, nope, my thought just crashed. If it comes back, I'll let you know.
Cool.
He wanted to make it clear that he did not think the Constitution was written merely to benefit the Founding Fathers personally, although one could not ignore the $150,000 fortune of Benjamin Franklin, the connections of Alexander Hamilton to wealthy interests through his father-in-law and brother-in-law, the great slave plantations of James Madison, the enormous landholdings of George Washington. Rather, it was to benefit the groups the founders represented, the, quote, economic interests they understood and felt in concrete, definite form through their own personal experience. Not everyone at the Philadelphia Convention fitted Beard's scheme. Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts was a holder of landed property, and
What's that?
So, you don't own property, you don't own a farm, but you're a person who works on these things, and you probably know more about it and how it works and best practices better than the person who owns it. So, who really owns the farm?
Right. Yeah, that's a big contention of people on the left is the people that do all the work to actually produce the stuff get the shaft every time. Our country respects, intellectual effort, if you can even call it intellectual effort to own something. I mean, you have to defend it in court, I suppose.
I feel like it's more monetary effort.
Yeah, but still, they see people that own a deed or have done a creative endeavor, say in the case of some sort of intellectual property, as being much more important than the people that assemble those ideas into reality and actually make everything run.
But if you
physically
don't have the people there to maintain or perpetuate or to make suggestions or inform of things that are defective or broken or things that are going well versus things that are perpetual struggles, I don't know. Never mind.
Yeah, no. That's exactly what Marx was getting at with pretty much all of his writings. Is that, yeah? Why should the people that do all the effort? He didn't come up with the labor theory of value, but he was a big proponent of it. The idea that value is only comes into existence through physical effort, and so why should none of those people enjoy any of the benefits that come with ownership? Because
the system is set up to keep those people down.
Absolutely.
Because you know why? They scared.
Right, because wealthy, elite, delicate white men are terrified of having to do physical labor.
Can we just dub them doilies?
Doilies? How does that? Okay.
Very delicate.
The doily class,
full of
sure.
holes and usually white.
And very fragile.
And very fragile.
Tear at the least little bit of. Oh yeah. Yeah. So they're so deathly afraid of working that they will do any amount of mental gymnastics to make it so they don't have to, but everyone else does.
Which is so interesting because, so many of these people with the power and all the money and all the means, right? Could fix so many problems. Not only...
It doesn't make sense, does it?
For society as a whole, but, for themselves. Could you imagine how many more people would take fucking weird-ass jobs? Excuse my French. If universal healthcare were a thing, because honestly, if universal healthcare were a thing, I really love the job that I'm doing right now. I love it. I'm happy. I'm fulfilled. I would totally continue doing it.
Well,
but because I don't have benefits.
Well, no, in overall, they just don't care enough. They as long as they can keep the system going and it benefiting them, then they will do what they can to get away with as little of a wage as possible to attract enough and the right sort of people to a job, the people that have the right skill set, and are not going to give anything extra.
Though to be fair, my current boss is very pro universal health care,
That's cool.
and they advocate for it a lot. And they're very, very tiny business, like 10 people.
Sure.
So
She should also offer healthcare benefits, and if she was even better, she would be.
just, I don't want to knock anything, okay?
I'm not. It's not a knock against anybody or anything. She's playing the system that is in place, but it could still be better. It could be an employee-owned and operated endeavor, not just all done by her. Well, I mean, and this is part of the problem is that people sometimes like their bosses, and so they're willing to put up with less or just, be grateful for having a nice work environment when all of these things, having a nice work environment should be a minimum. Having a boss that doesn't treat you like shit should be, not the bar that we're setting for ourselves. That should be the floor that we're setting.
But that's the problem with this system that we live in, Zach. Like, I mean, shit. Think about, like, God, I feel like I beat a dead horse every time, and I'm so sorry. You guys can tell me to shut up anytime.
I want to tell you to shut up.
People that work in education, I'm thinking specifically paraprofessionals, right? Like, teachers can opt for a salary that goes year round. And I mean, technically in this job upcoming, I could have also opted for that, but I wanted to be paid more per check instead of less. So that was my decision. But that is more often than not the case, that you're only paid for the 9 months that you're working. You don't get to stretch that through. You don't get to stretch that out.
Right.
And like your benefits also stop when you stop. And these existing systems of like ACA and that they don't cover people. Or it's just like not
Not for an
monetarily
affordable price.
Right, it's not truly affordable. And I don't know if that was how that started because I had never had a need, or that was something that had changed under the previous administration or the current administration. But I mean, it's frustrating and it's so hurtful. And if we had things like universal health care, people could take all sorts of odd jobs and it wouldn't, like...
That's true, James.
What?
He says no one tells you to shut up, and if they do, I get rid of them.
Oh. I know. Still, I worry. Because I get on about the same stuff, but it's like my go-to because it's like the best example of somebody being super fucking exploited and not having much... Pull my cord away.
Oh, I'm sorry. Put it right there.
Thanks. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then that just gets into the idea that things that are not seen as profitable, such as education and care work and stuff like that, where there's no obvious profit motive. They tend to not be well-paying jobs. They tend to just be less valued in society, even though, from an ethical and a moral standpoint, they're crucial. Mm-hmm. No one wants all the old people to just get shuffled off to an early grave because no one wants to take care of them.
Right. They go into these group facilities where they're very poorly taken care of. Wow, what is wrong with my brain? I think I ate too much and now my stomach is like...
Oh, you got that food coma.
Yeah.
That's okay. I've been feeling a bit fuzzy too. Maybe we got a gas leak.
Oh, great.
Yeah, just one more thing. One more charm of this apartment complex.
Because
our landlords care so much about us.
Because we can only get into our building through one door because the other 3 doors are broke. And one has a key jammed inside.
Yep. Yeah, fun times, fun times.
But no one wants to call for a replacement because they'll charge you $75 even though it's their fucking door. It's not like you didn't have a key.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know why anyone wouldn't have a backup key, though, that they could just make a copy of.
Well, our one neighbor, I think, lives alone. And they don't... You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, they should still have a backup key.
Yeah, but if they're outside and the backup key's inside, because you usually don't keep both of your keys on the same ring.
Well, true. That would suck the one time, but anyway.
They better not have gotten another fucking dog. I don't even have one dog. You don't get to have 6. You bitch.
I don't think it's to have as many dogs as they like and just be nasty to everybody. But getting off topic.
Yeah.
Shall we continue in the book?
Let's keep on keeping on. Howard
And
Zinn.
yet he opposed the ratification of the Constitution. Similarly, Luther Martin of Maryland, whose ancestors had obtained large tracts of land in New Jersey, opposed ratification, but with a few exceptions, Beard found a strong connection between wealth and support of the Constitution. By 1787, there was not only a positive need for strong central government to protect the large economic interests, but also immediate fear of rebellion by discontented farmers. The chief event causing this fear was an uprising in the summer of 1786 in western Massachusetts, known as Shays' Rebellion.
Okay.
In the western towns of Massachusetts,
They're all worried about farmers getting upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, who the fuck feeds people?
Well, the wealthy landowners that own them.
No. Who feeds people?
You know that's how they saw it, though.
Right. But that's not cool.
It's just like literally modern landlords, the ones that go on like TikTok and stuff,
They're food
do not
lords.
understand. That's not what I was gonna say. Can I say it? Do not understand that they don't actually provide housing, because they're like, well, where would you live if you didn't have a landlord? And it does not compute. There's some short circuiting happening in their brain where they don't realize that if there were no landlords, people would just own those places that they live rather than pay the mortgage of their landlord instead. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to learn that the wealthy landed gentry of the day literally did not understand that they did not provide anything, that they just took.
Yeah. They just redistribute. They exploit and they redistribute.
Well, they redistribute to their own pockets.
Well, yeah. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. They take 90% and they divvy out
Yeah.
10 between the farmer
Just
and
enough for them to barely live. And
the
then sometimes not
stores.
even that. As
Yeah.
long as there's a steady supply of other desperate people willing to come farm, then yeah, who cares if they even work themselves to death?
But also, like, farming, I feel like is such a... Like, we're in a drought right now.
Mhm.
So you're not going to be able to get the same quality of necessary goods. Or, like, you're not going to get as bountiful, I guess, of a harvest, right? Because, like, there's only certain foods that do really well in drought-type conditions. And I think of things like tomatoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's other things that need more. Like, I'm not going to lie. The corn I've seen this year, it's not impressive. The strawberries I've had this year were pretty blah. Blueberries are the shit, though. But again, like, these things all matter.
Yeah, of course they matter. Of course, feeding people matters and growing food matters. And the people
But, like,
that
people have a
that
right to
literally,
food.
Well, I agree with that. The people of that time and the people of this time don't agree with that. They all think that you have to earn your right to food.
Who are they?
Even though,
Where are they?
none of them earned their right to food. They just happened to be born into the right family and inherited a bunch of property or a bunch of money, or were just given money by their family, or through their connections secured a good bank loan so that they could start their own business and exploit more people. So ironic that they always are saying everyone needs to earn their keep, because none of them did. They all got gains through no talent or um, you know, skill of their own.
But I mean, again, it's who are they to dictate what is valuable and what isn't valuable? Because, like, okay,
They're the ones that hold the guns. That's who they are to dictate. They have
yeah,
the backing of violence.
I'm I know, but I'm just saying, like, there's different ways in which someone can present or be valuable. Like, I mean, there's probably people in this building that don't want to work, and that's fine. But maybe they take care of the elderly people in this neighborhood. Maybe they just drive
Yeah, maybe for the
folks
first
around
time.
for doctor's appointments or.
Maybe for the first time, they are able to stop and think about what they actually want to do with their lives and how they want to contribute, and then they go and do it, rather than just having to struggle and survive and get kicked out of place after place, and you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, one side note here, James, you were asking if you get Amazon Prime, do you need to hear the ads? The way that works is if you have Amazon Prime, you can connect your Twitch account to it, and then you get one free subscription per month. It could be to my channel, it could be to any channel that you like, but it only counts for that one channel. Your other option is to just get a regular subscription without having Amazon Prime, because there's a subscribe button right down there. And if you do that, you get the custom emojis for my channel too, as a little bonus. And it's $5 a month. That's the tier one subscription, and then you won't see the ads whenever you're on my channel. So you have to do it for each channel that you follow. All that getting Amazon Prime does is give you a free sub once a month. So
Now, can you change that sub every month?
yeah, in
Or
fact,
do you, like, get, like, okay, let's say I sub to you,
mhm.
right? And then next month, do I continue to be sub to you and I get to add in another one?
No.
What?
Well, yeah, because that would be like infinite money that Amazon would be giving up eventually. Because those subs cost $5 a month, half of which goes to me as the streamer, half of which goes to Bezos.
You don't need it.
No, he definitely doesn't need it.
He doesn't even charge for that. He already gets your money.
Yeah,
He gets your money because you bought the GD Prime membership. And he gets money because I have an impulsive need to internet shop for organizational things.
right. I'm just telling you how it works. Um,
Mr. Bezos, I'm really disappointed.
I mean, I get the impression that he doesn't even know that Twitch exists or what it is. I think
Yeah.
it's just another one of his company's acquisitions that he has delegated someone else to make him money by owning. You don't have to pay for every show. The way a subscription works is you get 1 month. So every time you subscribe, you get 1 month of ad-free viewing. Anytime you get into the show. So whether that's the live show, whether that's looking at the VODs, the video on demand that you'll see on my channel, all the recordings of my shows, you won't see any ads no matter what you do on my channel. So no, you don't have to pay for every show. You pay once monthly, and then as many shows as I have, you can watch ad free. And I usually do a 2 to 3 hour show, at least 3 times a week. Usually, so I didn't make it this Sunday, but usually I do 3 shows. So there you go. You got between 6 and 9 hours of entertainment per week. All month long. I think that's a pretty good deal for $5 a month.
We had a super important hike we had to make yesterday, so.
Yeah, and then I had to rearrange the time that I saw my kids. So everything just got kind of bunched up at the end there. We had other chores to do for the weekend. So I apologize for not having a Sunday show,
But
but
it's
we'll
okay.
get back to it. And Dan said that he'd be open to doing next Sunday. So.
Okay.
Oh, did you not? Do you disapprove? Yeah, always disapproving.
Yeah.
You judgy eyes.
I'm just kidding.
Let's get back to the book, okay?
Massachusetts, there was resentment against the legislature in Boston. The new Constitution of 1780 had raised the property qualifications for voting. No one could hold state office without being quite wealthy. Furthermore, the legislature was refusing to issue paper money as had been done in some other states, like Rhode Island, to make it
So that's
easier
how
for
we are
debt-ridden
where
farmers
we
to
are
pay off
now.
their creditors. Illegal
What now?
You can't hold office unless you're quite wealthy.
That's basically the case, even at the local level most of the time.
I know, I'm just noticing,
So.
commenting.
Yep, that's true. And it's not just a coincidence. This is how the country was set up
What if they
and how
restructure?
voting laws. There's a lot they could do to restructure. They could have voter holidays. They could have mandatory registration, automatic registration to vote, mandatory voting,
They would
proportional
have-
representation,
I was gonna say,
ranked
what if-
choice voting. Okay, I was just kind of listing stuff, but
That's
if you
all
want
right.
to cut in and talk
No.
about a particular one, you go right ahead. So yeah, there are reforms that would help enfranchise people more. Absolutely. Allowing prisoners to vote in every state, making that a federal law that prisoners are allowed to vote no matter what crimes they have committed, because voting is fundamental to being a citizen, and you don't give up your citizenship just by committing a crime. These are all things that could happen. James says, you pay for the shows you recommend and this one, or pay once for all shows. Okay. So when you so there's a bar at the bottom of the screen that says subscribe, and it will give you different tiers that you can subscribe at. And then if you had your Amazon Prime account linked, there would be the option to do that as your payment for the month. But then you pay it once a month, and it will let you know when your subscription has run out, but you get basically 30 days of ad-free viewing of whatever channel you subscribe to. So you can subscribe to as many channels as you like. You could subscribe to For We Are Many. You could subscribe to Poor Pearl's Almanac, Mind of a Skeptical Leftist, any of the number ones like Ali Osher, who come in here regularly. As long as they are an affiliate, at the very least, if not a partner, you are able to subscribe to them. That is how this streaming thing is monetized. That's the main way, anyway. So all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, and it will walk you through. You can make it a recurring thing, so it just automatically renews every month. You can just do a one-time subscription, see if you like it, see if it's worth not having ads. It's all up to you what you want to do. But it lasts for 30 days. It's a month subscription every time you subscribe. No matter how many shows or how few shows I have.
Conventions began to assemble in some of the western counties to organize opposition to the legislature. At one of these, a man named Plow Jogger spoke his mind.
Plow Jogger.
I have been greatly abused.
That
Have
sounds
been
like a
obliged
plow job.
to do more than my part in the war. Been loaded with class rates, town rates, province rates, continental rates, and all rates been pulled and hauled by sheriffs, constables, and collectors, and had my cattle sold for less than they were worth. The great men are going to get all we have, and I think it is time for us to rise and put a stop to it and have no more courts, no sheriffs, no collectors, nor lawyers. Unquote. The chairman of that meeting used his gavel to cut short the applause. He and others wanted to redress their grievances, but peacefully, by petition to the General Court, the legislature in Boston. However, before the scheduled meeting of the General Court, there were going to be court proceedings in Hampshire County, in the towns of Northampton and Springfield, to seize the cattle of farmers who hadn't paid their debts, to take away their land, now full of grain and ready for harvest. And so, veterans of the Continental Army, also aggrieved because they had been treated poorly on discharge, given certificates for future redemption instead of immediate cash, began to
What's that?
Familiar theme. So, they're gonna seize their cattle even though they need the cattle for work. Like, men that can't afford their child support, we're gonna take your driver's license away
Oh yeah.
so that you can't get to and from work.
The punishments always end up making people even less able to pay fines and fees and stuff like that.
Right.
As part of the point, it's to, you know,
Perpetuate the poor.
right, it's to pass judgment on you and say you are one of the bad poor, one of the undeserving, and so you deserve everything that comes to you.
Shine.
Organized the farmers into squads and companies. One of these veterans was Luke Day, who arrived the morning of court with a fife and drum corps, still angry with the memory of being locked up in debtor's prison in the heat of the previous summer. The sheriff looked to the local militia to defend the court against these armed farmers, but most of the militia was with Luke Day. The sheriff did manage to gather 500 men, and the judges put on their black silk robes, waiting for the sheriff to protect their trip to the courthouse.
Okay, so it's $5 a month for a subscription. That's the lowest tier. There are other tiers above that. I think one is $10 and one is $15, I believe. I've never done a tier 3 subscription, but it's $5 a month, and you get this channel whether you pay for it or not. Obviously, it's just whether or not you want to have the ads. That's what getting a subscription
So he's
buys you.
asking who's dictating the price. Is it you or is it?
Is that what you're asking? Because it's I have no control over the price for the subscription. Only Twitch does.
Bezos, James.
Yeah, buck stops with Bezos.
He be going to space with your money.
And yes, Facebook and YouTube don't charge, but they also have monetization as well. You can make
ads.
donos on YouTube, and YouTube also. I think it's like what we pay $16 a month to have ad-free YouTube viewing, but that
Totally
applies
worth
to the
it.
entire platform. So yeah, I can see how you'd be a bit miffed that every channel on Twitch you'd have to pay for ad-free viewing. So it'd be nice if they did things a little differently. But that's the current system. If you want to have ad-free viewing, that's the only way to do it when you're watching live streams, is to have a subscription. And so what we offer subscribers is every channel has custom emojis, and I actually have more slots. Eventually, I will be putting more custom emojis into my subscription slots. But here, I'll show you. I'll go to it on my phone, and I'll show you the custom emojis that you get when you subscribe to my channel. But yeah, I do have to at some point update that and add some more emojis. And I need help from viewers too, to help me decide which emojis to use. So here are all of my custom emojis. Subscribe to my channel and you get all that stuff. So you have Kropotkin Intensifies, you have the logo of my channel, and then you have Powdered Toast Man, our unofficial mascot of Bread Theory. The reason they also YouTube charges too. You have to see ads on YouTube unless you pay, right? So if you're watching a YouTube stream, I think even a live stream, though I'm not entirely sure about that, but I'm pretty sure anytime you watch YouTube, unless you pay for ad-free viewing, you're going to get ads. So they do that, and Facebook is just later to the game, but I'm sure they will institute direct advertising through their streaming as well. Kind of surprised they haven't already, but being that that's the basis of Facebook, is an ad delivery service. Patreon is just if you don't want to give money to Bezos. The only thing you get when you subscribe to my Patreon is your name in the credits after every video, because I just haven't been able to afford anything else at this point. At some point, I want to have a higher tier and maybe offer custom or exclusive gifts like Bread Theory logo enameled pin, or maybe for a very high tier, a artisanal loaf from Amanda,
A bread theory bread loaf.
bread theory bread loaf with the logo cut into the top of it,
It's called scoring.
scored into the top of it. My mistake.
Yeah, well,
But Patreon, that's basically just if you want to monetarily support the stream, but you don't want Jeffrey Bezos or the Google people or Zuckerberg to get any of your dollars for doing so. It's a way to cut out all those middlemen and get more money to me as the content creator.
but James, if you get to the high tier, I will find a way to make and deep freeze pizza rolls.
Oh, we don't have that tier yet, so don't overpromise because I don't have that yet.
Make them triangles.
I am really kind of perplexed as to why Facebook has not invested. I think they probably just have not tried to invest more in live streaming. They just kind of see it as a very side sort of revenue stream. Because they could easily insert ads into Facebook Live. They just haven't yet. Pepperoni rolls. Get it right, Amanda.
Pepperoni rolls, pizza rolls, same difference.
I didn't say that, James. Don't get mad at me.
He's not gonna get mad. He's gonna be excited because who doesn't like pepperonis?
See, you made him sad.
That's it. I'm out of here.
Oh no, stay.
Though I will be in a few minutes because I can brush my teeth.
Okay.
Oral hygiene's important, guys.
Oral hygiene is very important,
Especially in my world. Sober or drunk.
So yeah. Anyway, it is weird that Facebook has not gotten to that point yet. But I'm sure it's coming. I think Facebook, at this point, you can have exclusive paid events, which is dumb. I've never seen that even occur. Because that adds a layer of logistics and begging from your audience that I don't feel comfortable doing. I don't want to put my stuff behind paywalls. That's why I put it out for free. The only cost is having to watch ads, I suppose. And then they have it so you can send stars, which is basically just like cheering on Twitch or doing a direct donation on YouTube. But they take a cut of that as well. So I don't know. But yeah, mid-roll and the pre-roll ads, that seems to be right there, something that Facebook could be doing. But they just don't seem to care too much about their live streaming platform and capabilities.
Okay, you win. Well, he doesn't win, but he was correct. There is a difference. Also, do you live in Virginia? Because I can't send them to you if you live
West
there.
Virginia.
Because they're illegal there.
West Virginia.
Yeah, but they're illegal there.
You said Virginia. West Virginia and Virginia are different states.
Oh, excuse me. Do you know where pizza rolls are illegal or pepperoni rolls?
I don't know. You'll have to look up the
I just did.
Okay. So it said Virginia or West Virginia?
Probably both Virginias. They're
Oh,
afraid
they
of
just
meat
share
and bread.
laws. They just pretend
They
to
share
be
a
separate
name,
states.
They share their laws.
I think actually the exact opposite is true, that West Virginia split away to avoid joining the Confederacy.
Because they're embarrassed. It's like Booney M when the brother comes to the shows and mom and dad are just like, hey, it's his brother, just let him be there. It's okay.
Well, you were looking up legal codes. I'm going to play the book a little bit more. I want to get at least to the hour mark. That would be great.
But there, at the courthouse steps, Luke Day stood with a petition asserting the people's constitutional right to protest the unconstitutional acts of the General Court, asking the judges to adjourn until the General Court could act on behalf of the farmers.
In Virginia.
Standing with Luke Day were 1,500 armed farmers. The judges adjourned. Shortly after, at courthouses in Worcester and Athol,
Direct
farmers
action.
with guns prevented the courts from meeting to take away their property, and the militia were too sympathetic to the farmers or too outnumbered to act. In Concord, a 50-year-old veteran of 2 wars, Job Shattuck, led a caravan of carts, wagons, horses, and oxen onto the town green while a message was sent to the judges. Quote, "The voice of the people in this county is such that the court shall not enter this courthouse until such time as the people shall have redress of the grievances they labor under at the present." Unquote. A county convention then suggested the judges adjourn, which they did. At Great Barrington, a militia of 1,000 faced a square crowded with armed men and boys, but the militia was split in its opinion. When the Chief Justice suggested the militia divide, those in favor of the court's sitting to go on the right side of the road, and those against on the left, 200 militia went to the right, 800 to the left, and the judges adjourned. Then the crowd went to the...
I mean, this shows the power of organized people, regardless of whatever the law says. Ultimately, an organized mass, or the organized masses, can have whatever sort of government they want and whatever sort of ruling they want. That's what it comes down to. So I think that's the big takeaway for me, is that there is power in the people as long as they are organized and moving in the same direction, and also can back up their claims with force. You know, just an unfortunate reality that such is needed. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Power to the people.
All right, that's a good phrase to continue on with.
home of the Chief Justice, who agreed to sign a pledge that the court would not sit until the Massachusetts General Court met. The crowd went back to square, broke open the county jail, and set free the debtors. The Chief Justice, a country doctor, said, "I have never heard anybody point out a better way to have their grievances redressed than the people have taken."
There you go.
The governor and the political leaders of Massachusetts became alarmed. Samuel Adams, once looked on as a radical leader in Boston, now insisted people act within the law.
And a shitty
He said
beer guy.
British emissaries were stirring up the farmers.
Sam Adams
People
isn't
in
that
the
bad.
town of Greenwich
It's
responded,
trash.
"You in Boston have the money, and we don't. And didn't you
PBR.
act illegally yourselves in the revolutions?"
Oh.
The insurgents were now being called
Gross.
regulators. Their emblem was a sprig of hemlock. The problem went beyond Massachusetts. In Rhode Island, the debtors had taken over the legislature and were issuing paper money. In New Hampshire, several hundred men in September of 1786 surrounded the legislature in Exeter, asking that taxes be returned and paper money issued. They dispersed only when military action was threatened. Daniel Shays entered the scene in western Massachusetts. A poor farmhand when the revolution broke out, he joined the Continental Army, fought at Lexington, Bunker Hill, and Saratoga, and was wounded in action. In 1780, not being paid, he resigned from the army, went home, and soon found himself in court for non-payment of debts. He also saw what was happening to others. A sick woman, unable to pay, had her
Really?
bed taken from under her. What brought Shays fully into the situation was that on September 19th, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts met in Worcester and indicted 11 leaders of the rebellion, including 3 of his friends, as disorderly, riotous, and seditious persons who, unlawfully and by force of arms, prevented the execution of justice and the laws of the Commonwealth. The Supreme Judicial Court planned to meet again in Springfield a week later.
1%?
Well, I mean, basically the same thing. Written by the 1% for the 1%. And if they happen to serve the rest of the people, that's just a, happy coincidence, I guess.
Also, isn't it ironic that 1% milk is the shittiest milk?
I would say skim is, but okay.
No, because skim you've already written off that you have no joy in your life and you're open about it. But 1% is
So
like...
it's a milky looking water.
Never mind.
I mean, all cow's milk is gross unless it's in the form of milk products. So straight milk is gross.
Cadbury.
Yeah, I said milk products.
Yeah, I know.
That
I
would
said
include-
Cadbury.
that would
It's
include Cadbury.
delicious.
Okay.
And there was talk of Luke Days being indicted. Shays organized 700 armed farmers, most of them veterans of the war, and led them to Springfield. There they found a general with 900 soldiers and a cannon. Shay asked the general for permission to parade, which the general granted, so Shays and his men moved through the square, drums banging and fifes blowing. As they marched, their ranks grew. Some of the militia joined, and reinforcements began coming in from the countryside. The judges postponed hearings for a day, then adjourned the court. Now the General Court, meeting in Boston, was told by Governor James Bowdoin to, quote, vindicate the insulted dignity of government, unquote. The recent rebels against England secure in office were calling for law and order. Sam Adams helped draw up a riot act and a resolution suspending habeas corpus to allow the authority.
Dignity! Have some decorum!
Yeah, they always call for that when they're legally fleecing you and robbing you of your property.
Like, please.
But you know, they're doing it in a decorous and polite way, so that's somehow better.
Fuck you, still fuck you.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Even if it's wrapped in a nice bow with a box. Yeah.
Authorities to keep people in jail without trial. At the same time, the legislature moved to make some concessions to the angry farmers, saying certain old taxes could now be paid in goods instead of money. This didn't help. In Worcester, 160 insurgents appeared at the courthouse. The sheriff read the riot act. The insurgents said they would disperse only if the judges did. The sheriff shouted something about hanging. Someone came up behind him and put a sprig of hemlock in his hat. The judges left. Confrontations between farmers and militia now multiplied.
Yeah, but they were saying it was poison hemlock is. I don't know if all hemlock is, but beyond that, they were saying that a sprig of hemlock in their hat was the symbol that they all rallied to, you know.
Oh. I gotta go brush my teeth, guys.
All right, well, thanks for being on the show. We're going to wrap it up in just a few minutes anyway.
Also, if any of you, not that it's moving fast now, are interested in some loaves, Lurch is currently in the process of being Frankensteined.
Yep.
He needs to be reanimated, so it would be a while until I'm in production again.
But you can check out sort of stuff that Amanda makes there at Ouija Bread.
If you'd like to look at some food porn,
yeah,
that would be the place for you to go click. You interested in bread? You like cookies?
Mm-hmm.
You like coffee cake? Check it out.
Check it out.
Zach can attest I'm a pretty good baker.
Absolutely. Best baker I know. It's true.
So sweet. But really, guys, my monster cookies are the shit.
They are very good.
Both regular and vegan. Both just as good.
It's true.
There's not a substantial difference between... God, I don't want to do it to my shoulder.
All right.
Who's pretty? You're pretty.
You are very pretty.
No, this guy's pretty.
Oh, she's talking about her Raven ZZ plant.
Yeah, he's a good buddy.
So James is requesting again pepperoni rolls and moonshine.
Pepperoni rolls and what?
Moonshine.
My grandpa makes moonshine. Apple pie moonshine, knock you on your ass. I forgot where there was once.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty strong stuff.
Grandpa T, Zach.
Grandpa T.
Yeah. Virgil.
I've never had his.
Yeah, don't.
All right, moving on. We'll wrap up somewhere around the 1 hour mark in this. So we're at 58 minutes and a half.
The winter snows began to interfere with the trips of farmers to the courthouses. When Shays began marching 1,000 men into Boston, a blizzard forced them back, and one of his men froze to death. An army came onto the field, led by General Benjamin Lincoln, on money raised by Boston merchants. In an artillery duel, 3 rebels were killed. 1 soldier stepped in front of his own artillery piece and lost both arms. The winter grew worse. The rebels were outnumbered and on the run. Shays took refuge in Vermont and his followers began to surrender. There were a few more deaths in battle and then sporadic, disorganized, desperate acts of violence against authority. The burning of barns, the slaughter of a general's horses. 1 government soldier was killed in an eerie nighttime collision of 2 sleighs. Captured rebels were put on trial in Northampton, and 6 were sentenced to death. A note was left at the door of the High Sheriff of Pittsfield. Quote, I understand that there is a number of my countrymen condemned to die because they fought for justice. I pray, have a care that you assist not in the execution of so horrid a crime, for by all that is above, he that condemns and he that executes shall share alike. Prepare for death with speed, for your life or mine is short.
Damn, that's a good place to end. So we're going to hear the thrilling conclusion to Shays' rebellion. And, I mean, spoiler alert, considering that the U.S. did not have a civil war before the Civil War, probably pretty safe bet that Shays' rebellion was not successful. But we will see how it plays out next time on the show. So we're at just past the 1 hour mark. 1 hour and 5 seconds. So that'll be where we pick it up next time. Thank you all for joining tonight. I think since we do have a couple people on Twitch, we will in fact raid into somebody. So if you have anyone in mind who you would like to raid into, and James, this will be a fun part. This is one of the cool parts, the unique parts of Twitch, is the raid, and that a streamer can send their entire audience to another streamer at the end of their show. And so it's a way to all support each other and get to know different streamers. So you know what? Tonight, I'm just going to go ahead and pick it. Epic Prawn, guy that I met recently. Really cool streamer. If you're reaching this some other place, here's the link to go check out Epic Prawn. Otherwise, we will start the raid presently. So thanks for coming. We're going to do part 2 of Umberto Eco's Fascism on Wednesday. So hope to see you all back for that. So until next time, see you guys and have a great night. I don't know if that worked. Did not work. Okay, we'll try that once more. Already rating Epic Pro. It's not showing up on his chat though. That's weird. I think something went haywire with my stream manager somehow. So we will try that once again. That's so weird. It says that I've already rated him. I don't know how that's possible. You're not bad luck, James. I don't know why it's not working. I think I'm just going to close it out entirely and get back in. Oh, it looks like it did work somehow after all that. All right.